Snyk. I'm so happy to be with you today. My name is Karen Alazari, and this talk is your invitation to join me on a journey to the future of cybersecurity, where we'll take a look at what's happened in the past 18 months, but also what we can expect for the next 18 months. And we'll take a look at that future, but not just from any perspective, from the friendly hacker's perspective. And that's my point of view. That's the point of view I've had for more than 20 years. In fact, I grew up as a hacker. I just didn't realize it. I was a very curious little girl growing up right here in beautiful, sunny Tel Aviv, Israel, where I'm speaking to you all from today. I had so many questions to my parents that at some point, instead of a bedtime story, I got volumes of the encyclopedia to read every night. So I was curious and thirsty for knowledge. And when we first got access to the internet, I found that to be a fountain for all of the knowledge and answers to my questions, sometimes hiding on other people's computers. So I taught myself how to reach all of those answers, all of that information. And I didn't realize that my activities were actually called hacking, not until I met my first hacker mentor at the age of 15. Her name, Angelina Jolie. She portrayed the fierce high school hacker called Acid Burn in the Hollywood movie simply called Hackers. If you haven't seen the film yet, you've got a lot to catch up with because it's a classic. And I personally think there's an entire generation of hackers and security professionals that were inspired by these high school kids, a group of hackers who use their powers not for malicious purposes, but actually to save the day. So spoiler alert, they were the heroes in that movie. And they were the heroes of my personal imagination because I saw kids who were as passionate and curious as technology as I was, using their power for good, using their access for good. And that's what's inspired me to follow in their footsteps. Since then, I've spent more than 20 years working with a variety of organizations, agencies, and universities. And in 2014, I had the honor of becoming the first Israeli woman to present at the International TED Conference. My message was that sometimes hackers can act as the immune system for our digital information age. And a lot has changed since 2014, not just my hairstyle. In fact, many people today think we need a digital immune system, one where hackers have a role to play, but we have a much bigger role. So that's what I want to focus on today. I think we can learn so much from what hackers are doing. Friendly hackers can help us evolve. Malicious hackers force us to evolve. So let's take a look at how attackers evolved in the past 18 months, because we have to follow. We have to look at what attackers are doing so that we can prepare our security defenses, but also be more knowledgeable about what's coming. Because in many cases, I think hackers are the early adopters for any new technology or technique. The first couple of stories I want to share with you today are what I call malicious innovation classics. Hackers and criminals in the past 18 months did not waste a minute. Every opportunity they had to launch a new attack or use a new technique, even invent a business model, they went for it. And the most successful criminal business model of this age is ransomware. Now, I want to talk about one particular strain of ransomware called RYUK. You might be familiar with RYUK as a character from the Japanese animation series Death Note. If you don't know it, ask your teenagers, they'll know. But RYUK also inspired criminals to create a very vicious piece of ransomware that would encrypt computers and then require a ransom in order to release back access to the files. This is what the actual RYUK ransom note looks like. And in the past 18 months, it's infected hospitals, schools, universities, technology companies in Europe, in the US, and around the world, proving that just like the note says, no system is safe. Nobody has been immune to the attacks of RYUK. After a particularly malicious attack in France, which caused damages up to 50 million euro, the French authorities conducted an investigation into RYUK, and they discovered that the malware, the ransomware, is so successful because they actually spend a lot of time in evolving it and advancing its techniques. So, for example, RYUK has worm-like capabilities that allow it to spread within a network once it's infected one computer. And it also uses things that exist inside the operating system and the network, normal things like schedule tasks and remote procedure calls. And everything that the developers behind RYUK do is meant to do one thing: reduce the time from the initial intrusion, that initial infection, until they get paid. And they have been paid millions and millions of dollars in ransomware. Just like the viruses that we have to deal with right now, just like COVID-19 and the coronavirus, malware like RYUK evolves, and it has variants, and it has different types of capabilities. And it also has infection vectors. So here are some of the classic infection vectors for ransomware. The first would be a phishing email that tricks people into downloading a file, typically a malicious Office macro, sometimes a PowerShell file, and running that file. And that's usually the first step, or the dropper, that then enables the further infection. Another way for attackers to get in with an infection like RYUK is through stolen credentials, passwords, usernames, account information that might have been already hacked and released on a database, or maybe people have recycled their password and it was discovered by clever attackers that know that's one of the easiest ways to get into accounts. And in the past few months, we're seeing a new trend using remote desktop connections, VPNs, and exploits, attacks into flaws into those remote connection tools or technologies or software that allow the attackers direct access into a computer inside the network. But there are other infection vectors as well, including international travel. Remember that from the BC age, the before Corona age? So last summer, a criminal traveled all the way from Russia to the United States in the height of the pandemic, going through lockdowns and tests, just to meet with somebody very special, somebody who works in this location. That's the Tesla Gigafactory outside Reno, Nevada in the United States. That criminal was actually pursuing an online relationship with that employee. And after several messages and communications and chats, they showed up and invited that person on a special trip to scenic Lake Tahoe in Northern California. On the trip, on the lake, they popped the question, not, will you marry me? But rather, will you accept $1 million in exchange to knowingly introducing ransomware into the Tesla factory network? $1 million question. Thankfully for Tesla, the employee declined, but they didn't say no right away. They let the FBI and the security officers know, and together they actually created a sting operation to arrest that criminal as they were trying to leave the country. From the indictment documents, the legal proceedings we learned, that criminal was part of a group that hoped to make more than $10 million from that ransom. And the reason for these higher ransom fees that we're seeing criminals extracting from companies is because of a double whammy attack approach. It's one of the latest innovations for criminals. It's the combination of ransomware and the extortion threat. So basically what happens is that once a company gets attacked with one of these viruses, it's not just they lose access to their own files, everything is encrypted. They are threatened by the criminals that if they don't pay the ransom, their files, their intellectual property, their customer information will be leaked to the public. So this is actually the model that's allowing criminals to be so successful with ransomware, because you can't just revert to backup. You also have to worry about that leak threat, which is exactly what happened to a company in Europe called CD Projekt Red. If you haven't heard about CD Projekt, they are the AAA game developer behind some very popular games that I myself enjoy, like Cyberpunk 2077 and The Witcher. Just a few months after Cyberpunk 2077 came out, CD Projekt Red was attacked by a hacker crew who left this note on their computers. And in the note, they threatened not just to leak the information, the emails to the public, but also the source code and the intellectual property of unreleased games. This is really the crown jewels for a company like that. Allegedly, they conducted an auction on the darknet to sell that intellectual property to the highest bidder, beginning the auction at $1 million. It's unclear whether they got away with that or not, but the name of the group behind it is kind of funny as well, Hello Kitty. It's a very cute name for a very malicious attack. Now, another innovation for ransomware operators is actually something called ROS. One example of ROS is egregor ROS. It's not a Russian sounding name, although it might have Russian origins. It's ransomware as a service. Just like other software as a service models in the ransomware as a service operations, the attackers create the tools to conduct a ransomware operation and then rent it out to other criminals that might not have the know-how or the access to develop something like that themselves. These other lower tier cyber criminals are called affiliates and partners. And operators like egregor actually work very hard to recruit more affiliates into their system. This is what the egregor ransom note looks like. And they also put some effort into graphics and the language and even the UI, the user interface. Now, very interestingly, in late 2020, a report was conducted on the market share of ransomware strains. Yes, these are market operators and they compete on market share. And as you can see, towards the end of 2020, the egregor group, marked in purple, became one of the most successful ones. How can we tell? Well, because a lot of the payments are conducted in cryptocurrencies, there's actually research done into the cryptocurrency transactions on the blockchain that allow us to track the payments that go into the wallets that run many of these ransomware groups. So according to the information, about more than $18 million has been paid to the group behind egregor. And remember, they are running it as a service. So that's just what their affiliates are keying back to them. According to the research, an average ransom could cost up to $700,000. But I think that's just a percentage that they're taking off the top. And the actual attacks are much more expensive. Another innovative piece of ransomware is called Lockbit. And Lockbit recently announced their version 2.0. The reason that they are compelled to announce new versions is because they are competing with egregor and with the other ransomware operators. They're competing for those affiliates that will spread and distribute their software. Just like in the regular software development world, there's a difference between creating the tool and distributing it and making sure that a lot of people use it. So Lockbit are actually now trying to recruit some of their victims to become their affiliates. Check it out. This is the actual ransom note by Lockbit. And inside the note, in the fine print, they actually ask their victims, would you like to earn millions of dollars? Here's how to contact us. And if you provide us with account information into companies' networks that allows us to run this ransom campaign, you will be compensated. They even have reviews on criminal marketplace websites. Reviews like one of the best designed lockers on the market with a focus on speed and of encryption as well as functionality. So the operators behind these attacks work like business people, and they work like some of the most agile, innovative software developers out there. This is the reason that many security researchers have said the past 18 months have been like a criminal renaissance. But this criminal renaissance of innovation, sophistication, and new business models wasn't just for an elite group of cyber criminals or for those scary nation state hackers and the cyber attackers that we hear about in the news. What we've actually experienced is also a phenomena of democratizing attacks. What do I mean by that? More criminals have more access to attack tools, to different types of malware and exploits, and attack infrastructure that actually allows them to go ahead with attacks with a much lower barrier of entry into this field, including some of the most dangerous security research tools and hacking tools out there. Some of you might remember from 2016 to 2017, a hacker group nefariously known as the Shadow Brokers. The Shadow Brokers leaked the hacking tools of the NSA, the American Security Agency. Some very infamous hacking tools, including Eternal Blue, the exploit that was behind the attacks of WannaCry and NotPetya, some of the biggest attacks of 2017. Well, Eternal Blue wasn't the only one. The Shadow Brokers had a huge trove of exploits, vulnerabilities, and attack tools. And now every hacker has access to these types of tools, and they can use that. They don't have to develop zero-day unknown exploits themselves. They can also use tools like Mimikatz. Mimikatz was created by security professionals to showcase how easy it is to steal passwords and credentials inside Microsoft environments. And it's more than a decade old, but it's still very popular amongst security researchers and malicious attackers. Another tool that hackers like to use these days, it's very trendy, is one that exists on any Microsoft machine, PowerShell. Simply a scripting environment that allows you to run a lot of processes on a Microsoft machine. It blends into the natural environment, doesn't look malicious, it's hard to track and log, and this is what criminals like to use these days. And using things like PowerShell that are already in the operating system is also called living off the land. Sometimes we see an interesting combination of several of these. For example, the next story I want to share with you is a proof of concept attack called process hollowing. I thought it was pretty cool when I first learned about it. So what a security researcher did in this case is that he took a tool like Mimikatz, which is malicious. You're not supposed to have that in your environment, looking for credentials, stealing passwords, and harvesting them. But they wanted to run that innocuously inside Notepad. So basically, they created a PowerShell script that allows them to hollow out one of the processes within Notepad and run Mimikatz inside that process. And take note of, in particular, of that memory address 4000000, because even if you look up the Notepad process in the task manager or in process monitor on that machine, it would seem like there's just a legitimate Notepad exec running, and it's just a legitimate process that's running, but it's actually running Mimikatz inside of that Notepad. Kind of clever. And the person who created that put it up on GitHub so anybody could take advantage of that PowerShell script or create similar tools like it. It also has a cool reference to Dark Souls, which I think is one of the best video games ever created. But that's besides the point. Another cool tool that security researchers and malicious hackers like to use is called Shodan. Shodan, like the black belt in karate, is like a Google search engine for connected devices. And people have used it to identify office Xerox machines, coffee machines, ski lifts, power stations and power turbines, a variety of technologies and devices that someone connected to the internet. So through Shodan, you can scan and identify all sorts of devices. Now, there's another popular security tool called Metasploit. I imagine some of you might be familiar with it. For those who are not, Metasploit is the most popular framework for testing against exploits. So it includes a lot of the known exploits, attacks, and you can scan using Metasploit for a vulnerable operating system or a server, and then run the particular exploit that you want to run. So a clever criminal created a combination of Metasploit and Shodan, and they called it Autosploit. I'm actually not sure they're a criminal because they claim that they released this tool for the benefit of the security research community, and they put everything on GitHub. Autosploit allows any security researcher or malicious hacker to scan for potential targets and then use the Metasploit library of exploits to launch them. And it's actually included in Kali Linux. Kali is a version of the Linux distribution, the Linux operating system. And Kali has a lot of hacking and security tools on it. If you're unfamiliar with it and you want to get to know what a hacking operating system looks like, have a look at Kali. Now, I mentioned GitHub earlier. It's not just a fantastic tool for developers, it's also a great tool for attackers that want to go upstream. So in this particular example, an attacker identified a really interesting target, one that I don't know if you've ever heard of. JExplorer is an open source LDAP browser, and it's based in Java. It's not that popular, but it still has millions and millions of downloads and people who have used it. Some of you maybe have used it as well. Now, although the last known update on the JExplorer website was in 2013, on GitHub, you can actually find forks that are up to date from 2018 and later. Now, this is really interesting. Let's say you want to use JExplorer and you go to GitHub and you see a bunch of these forks. Which one would you go for? Well, intuitively, most people will go for the one that has the most star reviews. The one that's most starred must be the most popular, legitimate, mainstream one. It turns out the attackers know that this is exactly how people think. So they created a fake network of GitHub accounts just to raise the profile of their fork of that particular JExplorer. And of course, they included a little backdoor into the code. So it's not just LDAP browser functionality, it also allows some functionality for the criminals. This is a simple example of something that in a more complicated environment might be called a supply chain attack. Instead of attacking the victim, you go after the supply chain of software or technology that victim uses. Perhaps the most notorious and infamous supply chain attack we've had to deal with in the past year has been the SolarWinds attack, where malicious state-sponsored attackers used for a long time the software update capabilities of a security company to run their malicious code on the networks of many of that company's clients, including classified US military and security agencies. Now, we are still coming to grips with the impact of that attack. It's also sparked some changes in American legislation and executive orders, but there's a few things I want to say about that. The attack really forced a reckoning with this idea of supply chain security. Can we trust the code that we run, the code that we buy and that we run? And for a lot of companies, they actually paused third-party software updates, which ironically makes them more at risk, because if they don't receive security updates, they might be vulnerable to vulnerabilities and exploits that the criminals already know about. Now, a lot of companies also introduce new reviews for any new technology, any new vendor, any new partner that they're onboarding, which raised bureaucracy, but didn't necessarily do a lot to raise security for everybody. It also created an environment where politically companies are now expected to disclose breaches more transparently, which I think is a positive development. And lastly, for the developers among you, the introduction of the concept of software bill of materials. It's not an entirely new concept at all, but because of these attacks, it's now becoming more popular. The requirement to have an ingredient list for everything that goes into a software or technology process. And while it's a fantastic idea that I support, it's not that easy to execute and implement for a complicated technology environment. For me, though, there's another lesson that we have to take to heart from the SolarWinds attack. These are attackers that use their access into that company and their servers and their updates for more than a year. And they did that covertly and quietly. Unlike the attackers behind RYUK and other ransomware, they're not going for money. They're going for time, and they're going to use that time for influence, to gather information, to gather intelligence. This is a much more strategic type of attacker. And that, to me, is one of the main differences that we're seeing. A lot of cyber criminals that are there for the quick bucks, but strategic attackers that are there to stay for the long run. So the attacker mindset can actually teach us a lot about what we can expect. And just like in the Chinese game of Go, every attack should inform the defense and the way we think about the future. There is so much that we can learn from what we've experienced. Now, at the same time, our lives have also changed. Our digital universe exploded. We rely on digital connectivity for everything. And in order to thrive and survive and plot our course for the new normal, we have created a digital infrastructure to support us, but we've also created an expanding attack surface of targets for victims to go after. Multiple devices, endpoints, and of course, personal devices and work devices. And the perimeter, the old school perimeter defense, the network defense that many organizations used to rely on is gone. The perimeter is gone. Long live the new perimeter, which needs to exist wherever people are transacting with information, wherever people are logging on or conducting business in one way or another. And of course, I'm sure you've all experienced how companies that once were shy about digital transformation and cloud adoption had to rush very, very quickly to deal with this new reality. So this has created our new normal. It's also created the new office, which is our home. And that's a reality that's not going to change. We're going to go back to hybrid work modalities, but many people are going to be working remotely for the rest of their lives. That's my forecast. That's my expectation. And in that reality, that hybrid work modality, it also means people are using their personal devices for professional needs. If you're anything like me, you probably have more devices surrounding you right now than family members or pets. So that's the new landscape that we have to deal with. And in this landscape of unfeathered access from any type of device that people have, it's very, very hard to implement excessive security controls. In fact, you might have seen this cool cat video that really exemplifies what happens when you try to enact stringent and more stringent security controls. Users will find their way beyond them, whether it's password policies or access controls or DLP, and eventually using their own devices as a way to quickly bypass any type of security control. So this is part of what we have to deal with. And for a lot of people, the everyday security decisions that they make are ones that actually have a security impact for the entire organization. It's very popular to talk about the people on the other side as the weakest link in the security chain. I think we need to talk about them as the first line of defense. You and the people that you work with, and certainly the people that use your technology and your products, are on the first line of defense. We all are. And the exciting fact, from my perspective, is that hackers can actually help. And there are more friendly hackers out there that are helping people in surprising ways. In fact, a company dealing in cryptocurrency recently experienced a heist where they lost access to the keys controlling more than $600 million in cryptocurrencies. So they reached out to the hacker and they actually asked them for advice. They asked them to become their chief security advisor. And after some negotiations and conversations, that hacker not only returned all of the funds, they even gave back funds that were donated to him or her by other hackers and other people. And in fact, the company reached out to them on Twitter saying, "Thank you, we're ready for a new journey." So even these types of incidents sometimes have a happy ending. And another phenomenon that I'm personally excited about is bug bounty programs. These are ways for all sorts of companies to work with individual hackers, maybe even work with you if you can find a security vulnerability and disclose it. One of the biggest companies that has bug bounty programs is Tesla. And they started early. They started by bringing their Tesla car to DEF CON, the world's largest convention of hackers. But then they built on top of that by coming up with these challenge coins that only go to the top hackers that can identify vulnerabilities in Tesla's products, their hardware, their cars, and their software. And a couple of years ago, Elon Musk even visited that hacker convention in person. I know because I was there. And he brought his heads of engineering for Tesla and for SpaceX to hire hackers at the world's largest convention of hackers. Another organization that has reached out to hackers for help, the Defense Department. The Pentagon launched a Hack the Pentagon program more than 5 years ago. And they also give out challenge coins like Hack the Pentagon, Hack the Army, Hack the US Air Force. Who wins them? Kids like Jack Cable, who won all 3 of these in his senior year of high school. A variety of organizations have opened their minds to working with hackers from all over the world. And the companies that do this range from retail to technology to household brands. In fact, throughout the pandemic, BugCrowd, a popular bug bounty platform, discovered that the amount of reports on high risk, that means more dangerous vulnerabilities, have gone up during the pandemic. That means that hackers sitting at home in lockdown actually use their time productively. Other hackers around the world use their time to protect COVID contact tracing apps. That's what happened with the Yes We Hack program in France that actually used crowdsourcing hackers to identify vulnerabilities in the French Stop COVID application. Another group of hacker volunteers joined together to form something called the CTI, the Cyber Threat Intelligence League, that banded together to help protect hospitals and healthcare providers from ransomware and cyber attacks. The people who created the CTI have been called by security professionals the Batman, the Superman, and the Aquaman of the CTI League. So they have been compared to the Justice League. And on the other side, Wired Magazine called them the Cyber Avengers. So let me know in the comments, are you team DC or Marvel? In any case, I think it's time for more hacker heroes to uncover their true identities. Yes, there are many friendly hackers out there, and you might be part of that friendly hacker ecosystem. In fact, according to many workforce reports, the world needs millions of security professionals to join our ranks. There's millions of unfulfilled security jobs. That's one reason I'm excited about programs like the Girl Scouts that are now learning cybersecurity skills at all ages. That's why when I go to hacker conventions like DEF CON, I look around and I don't see 30,000 criminals. I see the talent, the creativity, the curiosity of our future. The last time I went to DEF CON, I saw kids who went there with their parents because they think being a hacker is a good idea for their future. I feel the same way, which is why I founded two nonprofit initiatives. One is B-Sites Tel Aviv here in Israel, and it's Israel's largest security research community. And you're welcome to join us next year or virtually. And the other is the leading Cyber Ladies Network for Women in Cybersecurity, with chapters all around the world in Tel Aviv, Europe, North America, and the Asia Pacific region. Reach out to us if you'd like to join our network. So let's take everything I shared with you today into consideration. What's on the agenda right now is not how we go back to how things used to be. The BC age is gone. What's on our table right now is how do we build trust in this new reality, a reality that's constantly changing. There are some great lessons to be learned from hackers, but also by taking a look at how we do things right now, and can we continue doing the same things that we did 2 years ago or 3 years ago. I think it's time to take a page from the hacker's book, to evolve and adapt and get ready for a new reality. It's not about keeping calm and carrying on. It's time to adapt and evolve. I hope you decide to do the same, and I look forward to your comments, your questions, and a conversation on social media and in the chat. Thank you so much, everyone, and wherever you are in the world, stay safe. Sayonara from Tel Aviv, Karen Elazari signing out.